we can feel the pressure to constantly be positive, or a fear that we're wallowing somehow in our emotions. Yeah. Sometimes it almost feels like a collective denial that we all buy into this idea that we can do it, still do it all. And that when you sort of recognize that you suddenly can't, it gives you this sense of sort of frustration or guilt, or maybe, maybe I'm not doing enough. Maybe it's me, and actually it's the MS. There's literally nothing you can do about it.
Hi, I'm Lydia.
And I'm Helena. We both work at the MS Trust. Just a little disclaimer before we start. We're recording this over the phone because of coronavirus and social distancing. So apologies if the sound is a little bit iffy at any stage. Please bear with us.
And today we'd like to welcome you to our new podcast series, It's All in Your Head, which focuses on the topic of mental health and MS. So why this topic? Well, here at the MS Trust, we receive thousands of questions on the topic of mood, depression, anxiety, and a bunch of other things that belong under the mental health umbrella. In MS, we are really getting quite good at treating the physical symptoms we may have, such as spasticity or pain, problems with our vision or bladder. Yet we're not so good at making sure our mind gets the same care.
But through this podcast, we want to change that. We want to normalize the conversation around mental health and get people talking. This first podcast is all about how MS can affect mental health, why it happens, and what you can do about it. We're going to talk to some experts in the field and you, people with MS, who are living every day with these issues.
But firstly, let's start off by addressing the name of the podcast, It's All in Your Head. This is something we often see on social media that people with MS have been told. Everything from, strange symptoms before they were diagnosed to not so helpful comments about people who are feeling depressed.
Now, MS is an autoimmune condition where the brain gets attacked by the white blood cells that are meant to protect the body. This causes lesions in your brain, which can lead to an array of things happening, such as strange sensation like burning or stinging skin, dizziness, mobility problems. The list goes on and on. As the brain controls everything in the body, a lot of different things can go wrong, depending on where these lesions or scars, multiple sclerosis actually means many scars. So in a way, it is all in your mind, but actually for real, caused by things that go wrong due to these attacks. And not because you imagined it.
So let's kick things off by hearing from Gemma Lee, who's the Information Officer at the MS Trust. I, Lydia, spoke with Gemma a couple of weeks ago to find out more. Hi everyone, Lydia here. I'd like to introduce you to my lovely colleague Gemma, who works in the MS Trust Information Engagement team. Gemma writes lots of content for our website and publications, and also works in the inquiry service team, answering questions from people with MS as well as their friends and family. So we're going to be talking about MS and mental health today. And Gemma, I just wanted to start by asking you, what do we actually mean when we say mental health problems? As there can be a little bit of confusion, right?
Yeah, so I think mental health problems actually incorporate quite a wide range of problems. So for some people that might mean feeling low, maybe just for short periods, so having low mood. For others, it might be a bit more kind of persistent low mood, so that would be considered depression. Other people, it might be that they struggle with things like anxiety, so people with MS might worry particularly about the future, and that can cause them a lot of anxiety. And then I think stress is also part of mental health as well. So that can be caused by a variety of different factors, from work to family commitments and being diagnosed with a condition like MS. So it encompasses quite a range of different problems.
And can you tell us a little bit about the science behind mental health problems in MS? Because am I right in saying it can be a direct symptom of MS, like kind of fatigue or balance problems, as well as a consequence of living with a long-term condition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyone in the population can experience problems with mental health, but it's a bit more common in people with MS in particular. So things like low mood and depression are more common. So I think the research at the moment is that around half of all people with MS will experience depression at some point. So that's 3 times higher than the general population, which is quite a bit higher. And there's a few reasons why that is. So the first one from the science side of it. So MS, as many people know, causes damage to different parts of the brain. So if there's an area of damage in the brain that controls mood, sometimes that can actually lead to symptoms like low mood and depression. So it can actually be caused by specific damage that the MS has caused. And then secondly, I think living with a condition like MS that's a long-term condition can actually be really, really difficult to deal with, not just physically, but mentally as well. So people are having to live with uncertainty about the future. People can feel a sense of loss for who they used to be. People can feel alone and helpless. So all of those feelings have a big impact on your mental health and your mood day to day. And then the final thing is kind of the specific symptoms of MS as well. So for instance, if you've got symptoms like bladder problems or muscle spasms and that's affecting your sleep, then that most likely will also have a knock-on effect on your mood the next day. And also people that struggle with fatigue, that can be really challenging mentally as well if you feel like you can't keep up with what you expect yourself to be able to do. So that can have a knock-on effect on your mood as well. So I think, yes, there is the science element to it and specific damage to areas of the brain, but it is also kind of living with a condition like MS in the long term can take its toll mentally as well. So there's lots of different factors at play.
Thanks, Gemma. And as you work in the inquiry service team, do you get a lot of questions from people with MS who are struggling with their mental health? And what are some of the most common questions that crop up?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different areas. So one of the most frequent types of call we get is from people that have recently been diagnosed. And those people will often be feeling quite a wide range of emotions. So some people can be really upset, people can be angry, people can be going kind of almost feels like they're going through a kind of period of grief. So often when we're speaking to people, sometimes just listening can help and reassuring them that it's normal to experience those feelings and things will get better as you learn to cope with them. So that's kind of one area. We also do speak to people that call up and say, I'm worried about my mental health. What support is out there and how do I get hold of that support? We also speak to people that have perhaps already been to their GP and have been referred for example, for a talking therapy to help with mental health problems, but the waiting lists are really long and they're concerned about, well, what can I do now? What other support is out there? So we can try and signpost people to other organisations. And then finally, we do also speak to a lot of family and friends of people with MS that perhaps see that their loved one is struggling a bit, but they're not sure how to kind of raise the topic of mental health with them, and they're not sure how to kind of start that conversation and point them to the right sources of support.
And for somebody with MS who is listening to this podcast and who might be struggling, what would you say? What would be your main piece of advice to them?
I think reach out to someone when you feel able to. Doesn't have to be a health professional. It could be a friend or a family member that you trust. If you prefer to speak to someone outside your friends and family, you can contact our inquiry line. We're not counsellors, but we can offer a listening ear for you. And also, it doesn't have to be kind of talking to someone face to face. Some people find that talking to someone in an online group can be helpful. Other people prefer to pick up the phone and speak to someone like us on our inquiry service, so it doesn't have to be face to face. And then finally, I would say do go and see your GP when you feel able to. They'll talk through your options. Some people that's medication. For others, it might be talking therapies or a mixture of both. But I think the key thing is to just take that first step and reach out to someone and talk about how you're feeling.
And what about the friends and family of people with MS? Because we know it's really important for them to look after their own well-being too. What would you say to them? How could they look after their mental health and their well-being?
Yeah, so I think it's really important, particularly if you're caring for someone with MS, it's important for you to take care of your own mental health as well. I think being a carer can sometimes feel quite isolating. So it's important to make sure that you do take some time to do something for yourself and do something you enjoy. So it might be that you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to take 1 hour each day to do something for me, and that might be sitting reading a book for an hour, or having a coffee with a friend, or popping into the garden and doing some gardening. So I think just taking that bit of time out for you, and also reach out for support as well. So there are support groups for carers. So there's an organisation called Carers UK that have an online forum where you can talk to other people that are caring for someone with a health condition. And the Carers Trust website also, you can search on there for support groups in your area as well. So there is support out there for people that are caring for people with MS.
Brilliant. And just as a final question, where can people go to find out more information about the issues that you've spoken about today and to find support?
Yeah, so I think from an information side of things, the MS on our website, www.mstrust.org.uk, we have pages on there about managing anxiety, stress and depression, and there's actually lots of kind of practical strategies on there that you can try, so things like relaxation techniques, mindfulness activities, Pilates exercises as well. So there's plenty on there that you can do yourself to try and take some steps to improve things. There's also an organisation called MS UK that runs a counselling service for people with MS. So that's delivered over the phone in weekly 50-minute sessions. There's not a fixed fee for it, but they do recommend that you make a donation. So that's there for help as well. I also think the NHS Every Mind Matters website is really good as well. They've got lots of useful information and tools on there if you're having problems with your mood, anxiety or stress. There's a little questionnaire on there that I think it's 5 questions that you fill out, and you get your own mind plan, which is a few kind of practical things you can try yourself to try and improve your mood and things. So that's another thing you can try. And then there are lots of other charities that focus on mental health support specifically. So charities like Mind, Rethink Mental Illness, Sane and the Samaritans. So you can always go to one of those charities for a bit more support as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Gemma. So many great resources there. And thanks for your time today. I'm sure people with MS and their friends and family will have got lots of useful tips. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Gemma. Next up is neuropsychologist Anita Rose.
Dr Anita Rose is currently the consultant neuropsychologist at the Raphael Hospital in Tonbridge, but works across the globe. She is known as a champion for MS and provides significant input into the field via her clinical work, research, publications and consultancy to the MS groups in the UK. So we're really lucky to have Anita on the podcast today. So welcome to the podcast, Anita, and thank you for taking the time to chat with us.
An absolute pleasure.
And so today we're talking about MS and mental health. So I thought I'd just delve straight in with some questions, if that's okay.
That's absolutely fine.
So from your experience, what are some of the most common mental health issues that arise as a result of MS?
I think the most common mental health problems that I notice when I'm working with people with multiple sclerosis is predominantly people get very depressed or very low in mood. I don't like to always use the word depressed, but they're definitely very low in mood. They can be very anxious and generally feel stressed, and they describe it as probably feeling out of control with how they're actually feeling. So, I mean, there are other issues that we do notice, but they're much more rare. But I think it's the people that end up in my clinics are there because they are experiencing usually a combination of depression and anxiety.
And for someone who's listening to this, who has MS and might be struggling with their mental health, what advice would you give? What would you say to them?
I think the first thing I would say to them is this is normal. I think I found that over the years that people need to know, and I guess we all do, that what you're experiencing is normal, that it's well known about, that people understand it. And And I think that's usually the first thing I say is, look, what you're experiencing is normal. We know that a high percentage of people, up to about anything over 50% of people with MS, will experience what you are experiencing. I also will reassure them that it's something that we can treat. We can do something about it. We can do something about it both from a medical perspective, if that's the journey they wish to take, but we know that that's helpful. We also know that we can help them and help you by giving you what we term as psychologists as coping strategies, but life skills for living with the condition that you have. We may even be able to help you practically as well. There may be a specific reason why you're feeling as you're feeling at this moment in time, and we may be able to support you practically, either put you in touch with the right benefit people, or help support you get your PIP, or maybe help your employer understand what MS is. And sometimes people find that really reassuring, that one, I'm sitting there saying to them, we can help you. And two, what you're experiencing is normal. This is not unusual.
And you touched on it there, but some of the different treatments and resources that are available for people who may be struggling with their mental health, what kind of things are out there for people?
Well, for people in general, not with MS, there is obviously your GP and his happy pills, or his magic pills. No, seriously, we can treat depression with antidepressants. We can treat anxiety and stress with anti-anxiety medication. There is counselling available. There are people like myself, psychologists for people, but equally their MS nurses are more than qualified to be able to support them as well. You've got your MS UK counselling service that can be accessed via the MS Trust. There is lots of resources now. When I started working with MS sort of 20 odd years ago, there was no resources, but now we've got lots of rich resources. You can see somebody online if you wanted online counselling, if you didn't want to go face to face. You can do online programs to help you with your mood and your mental health as well. People like Mind and other organisations are now well adverse to working with people with chronic conditions like MS. So there is a lot of information and a lot of support out there. Often that's over-facing, and my role often is, as is an MS nurse's role, or working with that person, is often narrowing that down to the one or two resources that might be most applicable for them.
Brilliant. So there's lots of support out there.
There is now. And it can be hard it can be overwhelming, hard to find it, because when you're feeling really depressed or very low or very anxious, finding all that information can be quite difficult. And that's where the best resource to do is to go to a reputable organisation like the MS Trust, the MS Society, your local MS group, and say, right, someone help me. Where can I go? And let them do some of that legwork for you.
Now, if this was a commercial podcast, here is where there would be some adverts. But as we're a charity, we don't do that. But we would like to take this opportunity to tell you about our website, which is filled with information about MS and mental health. There's a fantastic A to Z that we call the topics such as depression, mood swings, anxiety, and lots of other useful things. There's also a great map of health professionals if you're struggling to find an MS nurse in your area, for example. Go and have a browse for yourself at www.mstrust.org.uk.
Right, we are back. So lots of really useful information and tips in there from Gemma and Anita. I think what I took away was that actually talking about what you're going through is so important. So don't suffer in silence, people. And also that, you're definitely not alone. Lots of other people feel the same way as you do. So although when you're experiencing problems with your mental health, I know it can feel like a really lonely place at times, but there's so much support out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it's said a lot, but do remember, it's okay to not feel okay. So we've heard from the experts. Let's chat to people with MS about this topic. Our next guest on the podcast is Carla King. Carla was diagnosed with MS in 2008, having had her first relapse in 2005. Carla is a brilliant blogger from the MS community, and you should definitely make sure that you check out her blog, My MS Bully and Me. Carla recently wrote an article for our magazine Open Door about her experience of managing mental health problems. So we thought we'd chat to her about the same topic today. Hi, Carla.
Hi, Helena. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here to talk about this.
Oh, thank you so much for being on the podcast. So can you tell us a little about when you were first diagnosed with MS? How did that make you feel?
Yeah, so as you said, although I had my diagnosis in 2008, I had my first relapse almost 4 years earlier. And actually, the beauty of hindsight, I had my sort of symptoms quite early in my in my 20s. But being in limbo for nearly 4 years and finally being diagnosed with relapsing remitting MS, I felt quite numb in the consultation, which is a bit strange. Perhaps, I don't know, but it just felt like I wasn't really there. It felt like an out of body experience. And I think it hit me in the car park after the consultation, just because of the enormity of the situation. But I think why I cried, I think, in the car park at the time was also because it was a bit of a relief as well, having been, for so long, without a diagnosis. So, I think there was obviously a variety of different emotions going on in that one time. But what was really interesting is that after that particular relapse had subsided, everything went very quiet for a few years. And, I kind of forgot about my MS actually for a long time. And it took me about 6 years to meet my first MSer. So I think because it took so long for anything to really happen or noticeably to happen, I didn't really feel like I needed to accept anything, because I guess I didn't feel there was any need to accept what wasn't there in an odd kind of way. So I think I went through the sort of 5 stages of grief very, very slowly. That was kind of my take on it, I guess. And I think eventually you go through the stages and you come out the other side. But everyone, what I've realised just speaking to other MSs over the years, is that everyone kind of goes at their own pace. And that actually you don't just visit these stages once. You can go through a number of different times and go over and over again. And so, whether you have a new DMD or a new healthcare professional, or maybe you have a new symptom or relapse, you tend to go through some of these stages, and sometimes you get a bit stuck as well, which is obviously quite relevant to this topic. So, so I think I've kind of been on a bit of a roller coaster ride, the sort of periods of time when everything's nice and free and I don't even think about the MS. And then there are points, within the last few years where it's kind of just peaked and I've had to deal with things.
I think that's the thing. A lot of people, you're saying, with their stages of grief and stuff, that, for some people it all happens straight away, and others it takes years. And there's not a straight journey that we can put up on a website to say, this is what you need to expect in the next few weeks, a month, years.
It's true. And I think one of the nice things about it is that, because there's no rule, you don't have to abide by any particular rule. Why I like using that particular analogy is because you can identify yourself within it. So there's no science behind it. It's just basically a way to kind of illustrate what you're going through, and then realizing that you're not actually alone. Which we can see in the forums. We can see, when meeting other MSs, everyone has a slightly different experience of their diagnosis consultation, but ultimately their experiences kind of feel the same, actually, in many ways. It's just for some people, it, like you say, it takes longer, and for some people, it's almost instantaneous.
Yeah, so you're doing the same journey, just some people go the scenic route and some people go on the express highway and other people go on a roller coaster.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Yes, exactly.
Right. So from a day-to-day basis, what are the main symptoms that you experience?
I've had optic neuritis in the past, and I think that's left me very occasionally with some blurred vision. So I'll have that. I think, like many MSs, I will have fatigue. And that obviously affects things like cognitive processing. So things like, playing with my memory, word finding, that kind of thing. And as with many MSs, I have bladder and bowel issues, and these can cause pain. But all of these things are most of these things are quite well managed through things like medications or just good planning and good strategy throughout the day. So I kind of go through periods of time where, again, I go through days, weeks, months where nothing happens. And then, you've got this little curve that, kind of goes up and you have to suddenly deal with stuff.
One of the reasons why we wanted to put together these podcasts was that we're good with this. We're getting quite good with talking about things, and even did more difficult things like bladder and bowel. We're getting more spoken about.
Yes.
But when it comes to mental health, why? We're this one, aren't we? What impact has MS had on your mental health?
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite generally quite a positive person, but I think what maybe, people reading my blog will understand better, but it's just my positivity is always balanced with a touch of realism. So I like to tell it how it is. And I think mostly because I don't think I'm alone, and I wouldn't want others to feel alone. So probably the biggest issue I face with any kind of acceptance is that I don't like general things getting the better of me. And one particular tricky symptom in 2018, or since 2018, back then I didn't think I was dealing with it too badly. And then randomly, out of nowhere, I started having panic attacks in the shower, of all places. And at the time I thought, wow, I've got to nip this in the bud before it gets, these things have a habit of getting out of control. And so, fortunately I had private medical insurance, and I went to see a psychologist who helped me realize that I had a real issue with the fact that actually, after such a long time between relapses, and that it was just that I didn't like this change, I didn't like any kind of change. And then I had to stop working because of it, which was a huge shift for me, because I love my job, I love the colleagues that I work with, and I love the environment. So it was just probably the biggest change for me. And I think where there's change is always things like frustration and not always facing up to the situation, I think. But interestingly, when I've gone to see the psychologist and she was kind of taking me through all of these things, I felt suddenly the panic attack stopped. That's the major thing. And then suddenly I felt like I was more able to deal with some of the things that I felt quite overwhelmed with suddenly. And the Americans have this lovely expression, sometimes you need to get out of your own way. And I felt that with this approach, that suddenly I felt more in control, and I started to be able to accept the situation. So I think there are sometimes, our mental health it's not always as cut and dry or as obvious that things are going on. But the brain will have a lovely way of kind of showing you eventually, so that was definitely something that impacted me and still impacts me today. But luckily, I think what I've taken is from 2018 and those sessions I had with this lady, took some of those techniques, and I still employ them today, and I always will, because when I feel myself kind of going down a particular path, I'm able to rein myself back in. So I think it's been just not just for that specific situation, it's been really great long term.
So do you think there needs to be more support for people with MS who are experiencing a mental health problem?
Definitely. And I think it comes in different forms. So like you said earlier, we need to be more open about mental health as a community so that we can support each other. But one of the things sometimes I feel like, and this is a comment around mainly social media, is that I don't know if you've ever heard of the sort of term toxic positivity, but this idea that sometimes we can feel the pressure to constantly be positive, or a fear that we're wallowing somehow in our emotions. And sometimes it almost feels like a collective denial that we all buy into this idea that we can do it, still do it all. And that when you sort of recognize that you suddenly can't, it gives you this sense of sort of frustration or guilt, or maybe, maybe I'm not doing enough. Maybe it's me, and actually it's the MS. There's literally nothing you can do about it. So these unrealistic, for me, it feels unrealistic to constantly try to live up to this ideal. And ultimately, whose ideal is it? So I think we're allowed to have these difficult days, and we each have different, very different experiences, even though we may have the same type of MS. So, from my perspective, I think we must continue to support our MS kind of peers in those things. But the other thing I thought of was that, sometimes when you walk into, an appointment with one of our healthcare professionals, I mean, nobody expects them to be counsellors, but it feels like sometimes there's more of an emphasis on the symptoms. And actually, I feel like if they had an emphasis on the whole person in appointments, it might allow them to see the bigger picture rather than just one element of it. So I really feel like we need to up our game, both in our own community, but also in the medical communities as well, because I feel like it will give us a signal that actually your mental health is as equally important as your physical health. So that was my take on that, I think.
So I mentioned your blog at the start, which we love.
Thank you.
How's your blog and writing about MS helped?
I think from a mental health perspective, I think it just allows me to write what I'm thinking. And it normalizes, the situation, helps me deal with that issue. I think cognitively, it helps me, it challenges me to look at the detail in the way I articulate things, in the way I want to speak. So, does this particular sentence flow properly? Would it be more impactful if I put this paragraph here instead of there? Could it be in a different medium? So, for example, I've written a couple of poems, and I think there's a real sort of sense of, if I support other people in the process, just by the very fact that I'm writing, others seem to relate to what I write, and it normalizes what they feel as well. So, because, so like you say earlier, sometimes we're just too scared to say things aloud. And I tend to go there. And I think because of that, it gets a really good response, because I think people understand that they're not carrying these things around by themselves, that there is somebody out there who has sort of similar thoughts or similar, challenges and barriers. So, I think that the blog is so, it kind of, in writing, I think there is a craft to it. So that's why I say the cognitive side, but actually just generally in the mental health aspect, I think there is something about, this kind of, you're doing something about something. So even if you can't speak it aloud to somebody, you're writing it down. So I've written, countless posts that I haven't even published, because they're really not fit for public consumption. They're just for me, because I just feel like I have to write my sort of, what I'm going through aloud, and it helps.
Have you got any other advice for people living with MS who are experiencing problems with their mental health?
I think so. So one of the things I experienced in the past, certainly in 2018, I think with anxiety, your mind becomes very cluttered with busy thoughts, and it can be very, things can become very distracting, and so it's easier to lose perspective because of that. And I think, if you find yourself upset or irritated or angry all the time, it's really hard to get motivated. So then those are the points when you need to start to get some help. And a GP is obviously the first port of call for this. So, but I would say things sometimes take some time to organise. And unfortunately with our mental health, because we generally don't prioritise it, it tends to get to urgent points. So something often happens in order for you to go, to prompt you to go to, see somebody. So, if you're waiting in line, it can take a little time. So obviously there are other organizations out there that can be, give you that support immediately. So if you're, in a quite a difficult point, Samaritans are obviously a really important place to go. But I was just thinking that actually before we got to those points, it would be really great if we could just, people often forget about the health bit of mental health, it's the mental well-being. I wondered if actually there are things we could be doing daily in our lives that could actually, sort of help kind of curb that a little bit, so for example, I do things like mindfulness, and I sort of look over my day and celebrate the things that I have done. So I focus on what I can do, not what I can't do. So I look at things like, I find my joy as the best way to describe it. So I kind of am quite grateful for sort of littler things, which to somebody else, I know you race and you do marathons and things like that, Helen. And there's no chance in hell I could ever do that sort of stuff. So for me, just making a simple meal, is a big achievement, and I celebrate that. So I think sometimes, in my opinion anyway, we sometimes we do prioritize other things over our mental health and we put that off. Mm-hmm. And perhaps what we could be doing before it gets to that stage is we could just look after our mental health every day in the way that we do taking our medications, our DMDs, or, planning and all of those good things. Maybe we just throw in a couple of activities that allow us to look after ourselves a bit better.
So our next guest on the podcast today is Chris Paget, a former professional cricketer who now works as a sports and entertainment lawyer. Chris was diagnosed with MS in 2017, although had been experiencing symptoms for a number of years before that. And we really wanted to get Chris on the podcast today because he's incredibly passionate about raising awareness of MS and mental health. And he's also soon to be launching an initiative called Milestone, which aims to normalise the conversation around mental health and also raise money for free charities. The MS Trust is one of them. Thanks, Chris. Calm and the Professional Cricketers Trust. So welcome, Chris. Thanks so much for chatting with us today.
No, thanks, Lydia, and thanks for having me on the podcast.
Brilliant. And I wondered if I could start by just asking you a little bit about when you were diagnosed with MS. So did you know much about MS at the time, and how did you deal with that diagnosis?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as you kind of mentioned at the top, I was diagnosed in 2017 formally, but actually I had begun being kind of tested back in 2013. And for various reasons, it took quite a while for the diagnosis to come through and be absolutely confirmed, albeit quite quickly. I think towards the back end of 2013, I was given a pretty strong indication that they believed it was MS, and that while they couldn't say definitively, they were treating me as if I had been diagnosed at that point, albeit I hadn't started on any medication. So I suppose, formal diagnosis in 2017, but really had been, I suppose, living with it for quite a bit longer than that.
And did you know much about MS when they first mentioned that it might be that?
In truth, no, I didn't. I was aware of the disease, and but only at a very kind of high level. And actually, probably my understanding or my knowledge of it was, just the tip of the iceberg cases, the bit that you tend to see in the media, which had kind of warped my perception of it when I was first diagnosed. There was a colleague of mine at Sheridan's who had MS and who recently left the firm that I'm at. And again, I think I'd never really spoke to him about it because he was there at the early stages of my kind of testing and kind of indicative diagnosis. But again, I think the part of the journey that he was on with his disease was quite far advanced, and so again, limited knowledge of MS, and the only real touch point that I had being somebody who was further along in the journey maybe warped my kind of perception of it. But the short answer being I really didn't have much, if any, knowledge of it when I was being tested and given the indicative diagnosis. And as you mentioned there, the nature of MS means that people experience it very differently. People are on different stages of the journey. There are different symptoms. Can you talk us through some of the main symptoms that you experience day to day? It can be quite a silent disease, can't it? And I think I probably fall into that category. I mean, for a very long time, I kept my diagnosis private. The day-to-day symptoms that I get are I suppose sensory. So I have little to no dexterity in my hands or my feet. I get I have quite a painful left lower leg, which again is exacerbated on fatigue or tiredness. And I also struggle with, well, it's called the MS hug, but it's certainly not very friendly. I get, when I'm feeling a bit more run down, which can cause problems sleeping. And like I think most people, I have a pretty weak bladder, so I'm a fairly regular in these times anyway. In the middle of coronavirus, I'm washing my hands as regularly as you're being advised, and I have been doing so for quite a long time.
Yeah. And see, today we're talking about MS and mental health, and the impact that the condition can have on people's mental health. I think both directly as a symptom of MS and obviously as a consequence with living with a chronic condition. And what impact would you say that it's had on your mental health? I know you've spoken openly about this in the past.
Yeah, I mean, look, a really profound effect, actually. And ironically, I wasn't aware of the impact that it was having to start with. I mean, as I mentioned, I kept for a very long time my diagnosis private for a variety of reasons, all of which I now perceived to have been the wrong decision. But I think I probably felt, or I know that I felt a really quite strong sense of shame around the diagnosis. I was really concerned about being thought of and treated differently. I was obviously incredibly scared of the diagnosis and what the implications might be. As I said, I knew very little about it. But the way that I perceived it of keeping things to myself and I suppose keeping it behind closed doors was really the trigger, I think, for me experiencing what turned out to be relatively severe kind of mental health issues. I suppose I was depressed. I felt very isolated, and so the effect was quite a profound one. I found myself, I had so much emotion, the full range, everything from anger to fear to to moments of great joy, to moments of great kind of low periods of despair. But I had no outlet through which I could communicate that, and indeed I was so, as I say, probably ashamed is the right word, of the position that I was in for reasons I still don't really understand, that I wasn't even able to communicate with my wife or my close friends and family that knew. And so the kind of the knock-on impact of that was that I just isolated myself. I isolated myself from my friendship group. I isolated myself from my family to a certain extent. And actually, really sadly from my wife a bit. I wasn't able to communicate with her about how I was feeling, and whenever she tried to raise it, I would shut the conversation down. And all of this was just beginning to really eat away at me as a person, as an individual. And it actually was only through Harriet, my wife, who kind of tackled it really head on, that I was kind of forced to I suppose accept and therefore proactively deal with the almost really the situation that I had created for myself. But yeah, it was a fairly profound effect that it had on me.
And was there a turning point as such which helped you to be able to deal with these issues, and where did you find support?
Yeah, I think I can't take any credit for dealing with my mental health, I suppose, in the first instance. As I said, Harriet really pushed me down that track. I'd got to a point where I just was not communicating on any level. I could walk out the door in the morning and go to work, but all I could really do was my job, and I could put on a mask, I suppose, and pretend everything was fine there. But as soon as I got back home, I just kind of shut down again. And so that basically got to a point where Harriet, I suppose, proactively sought help for me. She found a therapist. She spent a lot of time researching about the right sort of potential therapy, and then spent a lot of time, as I now know, trying to find the right person for me to go and speak to, because, you know, she was aware of how resistant I would be to it, and I was for quite a long time, because again, I had this, you know, blinkered vision or blinkered view of, and really ignorant view of, you know, I don't need a therapist, I don't need to talk about this, I'm fine, where of course I wasn't. So that was kind of where it started, I suppose, and I started seeing a therapist, Ilan, and for the first 2, 3, 4 sessions, I suppose kind of arrogantly didn't believe that I needed to be there, didn't really commit to what the process. But then there was one session, I can't remember which session it was, but it just, something like a light bulb moment, it just happened, and I just suddenly almost saw myself from the outside looking back. Do you know what I mean? And I just looked at myself and I just thought, you're just not the person that you think you are, and the situation that you think you're in is you're deluded. You can't see what's in front of you. And I suppose that was quite a sobering moment when actually it was almost like I then let myself go to the bit that I'd always been blocking myself from getting to. And that was kind of, you know, people talk about, I suppose, those light bulb moments or hitting rock bottom. I didn't hit rock bottom per se, but that was a very kind of poignant moment, I suppose, because it was for the very first time in what, kind of 7 years, that I had let myself, I suppose, accept that I wasn't okay and that I was vulnerable, and suddenly all of this emotion started coming out. Everything that I'd bottled up for so long just kind of poured out of me, and then did for a good number of not just sessions but weeks and months thereafter. But I suppose that was the kind of trigger point where I can kind of put my finger on. I began to turn the corner, or rather, I kind of opened Pandora's box, and everything came out.
And you mentioned your initial reluctance. Do you think that men sometimes find it harder to talk about what they're going through, to ask for help?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I think they probably do. I mean, obviously we're at the risk of generalizing, but on a general level, on a macro level, yeah, I think men do find it more difficult. I mean, I'm a case in point. I certainly did, and my friendship group, and, you know, some of my peers and colleagues, I can see fall into the same sort of category that I was in. And so, yeah, I think they do. And as to why that is, I honestly don't know. I mean, there is this kind of, again, I can probably only talk from my own experiences, but for me, I had this slightly warped view that the stiff upper lip and just battling on and everything was strength, because, you know, it's what we're kind of, you know, it's the very British thing to do, isn't it? You face adversity and you just keep going, which to a certain extent is right, and you have to do that, but you have the self-awareness to realize actually how you're feeling, rather than creating the illusion for yourself, which you then start to buy into. So yeah, I think I think men struggle with showing vulnerability, or have, at least in the past, struggled to show vulnerability. I think there is a beginning to be a bit of a paradigm shift there, and I think society is far more open to and encouraging of people, you know, being truthful and honest and authentic, which is actually a bit perverse, isn't it, in a world where we live a lot of our lives through social media, where you can create the illusion, you can create whatever you want to create, really, because it doesn't necessarily have to be reality. But yeah, I think it's probably, well, for me anyway, it was certainly a real fear of showing vulnerability. You know, I'm in a job, I'm a lawyer, so it doesn't necessarily lend itself to being open with one's feelings and emotions. You know, you are to a certain extent paid to be emotionless and stoic in what can often be quite testing and challenging times. And so, again, through the work that I was doing and the environment that I was in, albeit I'm in a very supportive team and a very supportive firm, but in the environment that I was in and the work that I was doing day to day, you kind of become that person a bit, or certainly I did. And so, yeah, it's but I think the main bit is vulnerability. But as I say, I do think that's really changing now. I mean, you only have to look at the amount of people with a profile and with a platform and how they let people into their lives, and it's not just showing the good stuff. It's being honest about how they're actually feeling, and that seems to resonate a lot more with people. And that was certainly how I found it when I did start opening up.
What would be your advice for others who are living with MS and who are experiencing similar problems with their mental health that you did?
I think the best piece of advice that I was given at the time and throughout, and I just chose to ignore, was just communicate. Find, everybody's personality is different, isn't it? And some people are very comfortable with sharing everything straight away. Some people are more reserved and it takes a bit more time, or they only feel comfortable talking, communicating, confiding in a close group or small knit part of their lives, or friendship groups or families. But I think whichever group you fall into, I think it's just communicating. I mean, as soon as I started communicating, as soon as I started actually being honest with, I suppose, with my wife to start with, and then with my kind of family and friends, was I then in a position to actually be honest with myself about how I started to feel. I turned to drink, I suppose, quite a lot. I would do everything at a million miles an hour, including drinking, and the real sad reality was that I would tend to do that on my own. And it was only in those times that I would I would be more open to communicating. And the reality was that's because I had so much that I wanted to get off my chest, but I didn't have the courage to do it when I wasn't, when I was sober. But it also gave me the excuse the next morning when Harriet was like, we need to talk about what we discussed last night. I could just say, oh, it was just the alcohol, I'm fine, there's nothing wrong. But actually it was very cathartic to talk about it. It did allow me to start to process what I was going through, and the diagnosis and the creation or the situation I'd created for myself. So I think it's communicating would be the overriding advice that I would give.
Yeah, and obviously Milestone is all about opening up the conversation and normalising the conversation around mental health. So can you tell the listeners a little bit about this initiative and your sort of reason for setting it up and what you're hoping to achieve through it?
Yeah, sure. So Milestone is we're in the process of applying to get charitable status. So I'd like to say that we're a charity. I believe that we stand for charitable causes and have charitable aims. So I mean, to start with, Milestone was really born out of my own personal journey dealing with my MS diagnosis and my own mental health. And truthfully, it started as a bit of I suppose, a bit of smoke and mirrors, really. I was coming around to the idea of having to be open and public with my diagnosis and actually not even talking about my mental health necessarily, just about my MS diagnosis. And I had this overriding sense that I had this kind of fear. I didn't want to be treated differently. I didn't want to be thought of differently or looked at differently. And I had this kind of worry that people, when they ask you, when you haven't seen someone for a while, like, oh, how are you doing? I had this overriding fear that they were going to ask me, how are you doing? But, how are you really doing because of the situation you're in? And this, I kind of created this kind of enemy. And so to start with, I wanted to do a really difficult physical endurance challenge, which would mean that I'd be fitter and healthier and, objectively objectively I would be better than I was before. Of course, that's an incredibly vain and shallow approach, but that was the position I suppose I felt that I was in at the time. But it morphed very quite quickly away from that, to actually, through communicating with friends, family, colleagues, and acquaintances, I really began to notice that the more I opened up about how I was doing or wasn't doing, I got immediate feedback from them. It was almost like a circle of trust was created. I had shown a bit of vulnerability, and therefore people started feeling comfortable with showing vulnerability back to me. And actually, some of the conversations that I had with even some of my very closest and oldest friends were suddenly taken to a whole new level, where suddenly we were really talking, openly and honestly for the first time, and it really that really resonated with me. And I thought, well, actually, I'm just a very regular bloke who has a very regular life, but I had struggled so much. There must be so many other people out there who are in a similar kind of situation to me, but don't necessarily either know that they are or feel comfortable enough with kind of engaging with it or communicating about it. And so it was from that place really that Milestone was born. And as you say, it kind of stands for, its main aim is to normalize the conversation around mental health by getting people to be open and honest and courageous in talking about it, and therefore hopefully encouraging others to do the same.
And if people want to find out more or get involved with any of the events that you've got planned over kind of the coming months and years, where can people go?
Yeah, so we've got a website, so it's www.teammilestone.co.uk. We also have social media channels, so we have Instagram as our kind of main channel, and that can be found at again I think it's team_milestone, and the same for Twitter. We have a YouTube channel which will be launching soon, and content is very central to furthering Milestone's aims. So we'll be putting lots of content out over the next few months and years. We'd love as many people to get involved and engage with us, take part in our events. We're running a whole host of sporting events, from endurance events through to we've got plans for cricket matches and five-a-side football tournaments and loads of different initiatives, all I suppose in and around the sports and entertainment world, with the aim of using sport as a conduit to help people raise awareness for mental health, mental wellbeing, and as I say, kind of normalize that conversation. And of course, most importantly, to raise money for the three charities that we're partnering with, one of which of course is the MS Trust, the other is Calm, the mental health charity, and finally the PCA, it's actually the Professional Cricketers Trust, which are the charity that helps support cricketers.
Oh, it sounds like an absolutely brilliant initiative, Chris, and we're really glad that we can work with you. On this new project. So thanks so much, and thank you for chatting with us today and being so open and honest about what you went through. We're sure it will resonate with lots of people. And good luck with Milestone, and we'll speak soon.
Thanks, Lydia. Thanks very much for having me on.
Thank you so much to Carla and Chris for being so honest and open about their own experiences there. I think their words will really resonate with a lot of people who are listening.
Absolutely. I think what really resonated with me was that they were both saying about the impact of social media on your mental health and that perfect illusion that people try to create online.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's so easy to get caught up in all of it and put pressure on yourself to always be positive and perfect all the time, because you think that's what is expected of you. We all put on a mask sometimes and can be afraid to let that mask slip and just admit when we're struggling.
Exactly. And I guess that's why we wanted to do this podcast, isn't it? To really normalize the conversation around mental health. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to feel really rubbish sometimes, because we all have good and bad days. And it's like what Anita said, that what you're experiencing is normal. Like over 50% of people with MS will experience what you're experiencing.
Yeah, exactly. And also really brilliant to hear about how Carla and Chris are raising awareness of mental health and MS. Carla through her brilliant blog and Chris through his new initiative Milestone. And just a reminder, you can find Carla's blog at mymsbullyandme.blogspot.com, and more about Milestone and how you can get involved with that at teammilestone.co.uk.
We'd like to say another big thank you to Anita, Gemma, Chris and Carla for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, a big thank you, guys. And remember, if you have any questions about MS, we are here for you. Our inquiry service is available from Monday to Friday, except UK bank holidays, from 9 till 5 p.m. And we're all working from home at the moment, but if you have a question, you can email the team at ask@mstrust.org.uk. And you can call us and leave a message and we can get back to you that way if that's easier. Our number is 0800 032 3839. And just to add, we're currently running an emergency appeal for our inquiry service to help ensure that those with MS have the vital and life-changing answers they need amongst the COVID-19 outbreaks. We know so many of you have lots of different questions. So if you'd like to support us in this way, you can do so by visiting www.mstrust.org.uk/MS doesn't stop.
And you can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. Get in touch and, like they say, like and subscribe.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye.